Every couple weeks, it seems, another VTuber is called out for supposedly copying another's design. And this is usually followed up by the VTuber telling us that while maybe yes, they took some inspiration from that other's design, they are still distinct and are not intentionally copying the suggested individual. Then, the fire either dies down as others agree with them, or the masses judge them false, and what essentially amounts to a harassment campaign begins. I do VTuber design critiques, and my submission form alone for doing so has had more than a handful of submissions that were near carbon copies of popular VTubers I'm familiar with. Now, I'm not always plugged into the happenings in VTuber circles, but just off the top of my mind, I can easily think of so many instances of alleged copying happening. Kage copying Kenji, someone copying Shylily, the Ram VTuber who just fully stole somebody's OC design, Powder's accusation of copying, Filian using models for merchandising without permission to do so, the never-ending claims that all sharks or pink cat girls are knockoffs, and I'm sure I'm missing some, or even a ton, because it seemingly never ends. Now, harassment is never okay, yes, even and especially over something like this, and I think we need to clarify the difference between copying versus taking inspiration versus just sheer plain old coincidence, and then go over ways we can best make unique designs and avoid this whole ordeal in the first place as a result. And disclaimer before I really get into things, I shouldn't have to say this, but referencing a VTuber in this video as potentially mimicking another VTuber or calling someone out for mimicking them doesn't mean that you should go give them a hard time about it. Please leave them alone. Please. And I'm not going to go very into depth into individual cases here, but if that's something you'd be interested in hearing, I know Toledo has a great video outlining a bunch of them. So, anyways, hi, I'm EG, and I've taught at the university level. And at many institutions like the ones I've worked at, we had very clear-cut definitions as to what constitutes copying someone else's art, especially as it relates to committing plagiarism. And as a result, I think this is a discussion we need to have in the VTuber design field right now, because the accusations just keep happening. And they don't stop happening, and they really don't stop happening. They don't stop coming, they don't stop coming. I see it everywhere. And I see people catching strays for it all the time, too. So, first, what does it mean to copy someone else's design? Copying, in a lot of fields, is defined as reusing more than maybe 3% of another's work without modification. To others, the definition is that copying is about intent. Under that definition, copying is defined as closely mimicking the work of another with a clear intent to do so. It's something that isn't always especially easy to define, as there isn't really a clear-cut line between what is and isn't, so we're often left to use our best judgment, which is tough. Sometimes, however, it can be incredibly easy to spot. For an example of this, if I'm supposed to design a character and I give you this, we'd probably pretty universally agree it's just too close to the source material that inspired it just by using common sense alone. This is not acceptable as an original design. Objectively, the silhouette, proportioning, concept, and key visual elements are all way too similar to an existing design, going far beyond just 3%. And if you saw this in the wild online, you'd likely assume the creator intended this to be pretty one-to-one with Mario, or at least to be a parody of him. And now this may seem like an example of an obviously copied design, but we've seen something almost to this very degree in VTubing before. Specifically, in more than one of the cases I mentioned before, where the copy had the exact same silhouette, proportioning, concept, virtually the same outfit, other keys of VTuber they're mimic, but just in a different color palette with small details modified. Other times, it isn't as easy to determine as this case was. But generally, if you make a list of the similarities and differences between two designs, and the similarities list is much incredibly longer than the difference in the list, the design is just too similar. Copying can also be taken a step further into consequences outside of harassment online, depending on where and when it takes place. So it's something that's best not to make any habit of just because it isn't something especially enforceable in the VTuber sphere outside of through clout loss maybe. Copying a design, like in some of the cases we've seen, would fall under plagiarism in an educational environment. Plagiarism is the representation of the work of another as your own, without proper credit and/or citation. In the art fields, the definition may be expanded to include knowingly using another person's unique images, objects, designs, research, inventions, arguments, etc. as your own, whether in part or in full, when it is not permitted to do so. This includes tracing another's work, using another's work as a base for your own without their permission or without properly citing you've done so, or creating a work that heavily references another's without developing enough clear visual distinction. This definition is on every syllabus, everywhere I've ever taught and everywhere I've ever attended school, and some version of it is likely on every syllabus you'll ever see anywhere, because it's a big deal. Committing plagiarism can and will not just get you a failing grade, but potentially also drop from a class or even kicked out of the program or school you're in entirely. It's a serious issue. Furthermore, in branding, copying can take the form of copyright or trademark infringement too, which gets you into some actual legal ramifications. Copyright infringement occurs when someone uses copyrighted material without the copyright holder's permission. This includes reproducing, distributing, performing, publicly displaying, or making derivative works of the copyrighted work. Trademark infringement occurs when someone uses a trademark or service mark without permission, or uses a similar mark, in a way that could confuse consumers about the source of a product or service. Hence, legally, if your design is too similar to something that is trademarked or copyrighted, you could be served a cease and desist for it at minimum. If not, wind up with fines and other more severe actions taken against you. These legal protections given to trademarks and copyrights are why we all make jokes about the legally distinct cereal mascots and others. They're obviously borrowing the base design, but still cuts from infringing it by making it distinctly to dodge issues. Kellogg's cannot own the pairing of a bird with a fruity O-shaped cereal, but it can own the design of Toucan Sam and the product name Fruit Loops. In VTubing, we usually purchase commercial rights to our designs from our artists, which is how we make sure we're above water legally when it comes to reproducing that design for models, merchandise, and more. We have seen the bare minimum of what can happen when commercial use rights are violated, on at least one occasion now, and a pretty high-profile occasion too. So do let that be a warning to not land yourself in legal trouble on the visual design front, please. VTuber corporations also trademark just about everything they can, from names of agency branches to individual logos, talent names, and more. HoloLive alone has over 100 registered trademarks. However, as far as I'm aware, indie VTubers aren't really trademarking their designs, likely partially because trademark databases are public, and ownership of trademarks usually has to be linked to a legal name or an LLC, which then can also be traced to find a legal name. It's definitely a privacy concern. With this in mind, just because you might not be legally violating a trademark, it doesn't make it okay to willingly mimic someone's design. Anyways, I'm not a legal expert on protections for actions for VTuber visuals, but my point here is a VTuber can't own the concept of a pink cat, a cat orca hybrid, a purple demon elf, a red demon, sharks, or any number of things. But if you execute that same concept in a way that isn't distinctly different from a pre-existing execution of it, you're bound to land in hot water still. So, after all of this, pretty please keep in mind that accusing someone of copying can be a pretty serious accusation to make. Twitter can function under mob mentality. You are startled as hunt. If you have concerns about someone copying your design or someone else's, please take it up with them politely one-on-one instead of taking to Twitter to stir the pot. Worst case scenario, and they are copying. But then you've gone and platformed them, and they'll likely still benefit from your call-out. Bad press is still press after all. And the other outcomes from a call-out are worse, where whether intentionally copying someone's design or not, they are now receiving mass harassment because of you. Do you really want that on your hands? I would urge you to not create a public scene about it, and instead address things privately with someone in a mature and polite way. Please. Moving on. Second here, what does it mean to take inspiration from something? Taking inspiration, as opposed to copying, is using something as a reference or initial basis, but then transforming it into your own distinct output. Taking inspiration in the art fields usually amounts to somewhat referencing another image, but modifying it to make it unique, or synthesizing several inspirations into one thing, and therefore, through that synthesis, creating something new and unique. The important thing with taking inspiration from something is that the source of inspiration isn't one-to-one with the output. For example, my 1.0 design took art inspiration from two main sources, and I had 3 inspirations for the outfit. And therefore, by combining all of this with my own ideas, I had created a distinct design that wasn't inherently copying any of those pre-existing sources I drew inspiration from. For some other examples, there was a really good VTuber trend, it was like a year ago now, where VTubers were posting their designs alongside the inspiration behind it, and it did a great job highlighting how inspirations should work, by being visible, yet distinct enough that they don't fall into straight-up mimicking. There's also, more recently, a trend where fellows are showing who their VTuber parents would be, which also highlights how sources of inspiration can and should optimally work. And third, what are coincidental similarities in design? Well, usually, coincidental similarities in designs are the result of playing into known tropes surrounding design elements or concepts. For example, Basing a VTuber design on a specific animal or item that has a very distinct look can lead to multiple VTubers based on the thing, sharing design aspects, just copying or directly drawing inspirations from each other in really any way, form. They might not even know exist. And this is completely okay. It happens way more often than you think, and often we can kind of tell that designs that coincidentally look similar are not intentionally copying each other too. In the art world, we often say that everything's already been done, and as a result, sometimes coincidences can just be impossible to avoid. Not all sharks are Gura knockoffs, not all sea mammals are Shylily knockoffs, not all pink cat girls are Nanners knockoffs. I could go on, but I think you get the point. To ask a VTuber designer to create a shark VTuber and expect them to not subconsciously draw some level of inspiration from Gura is just nuts to require. Her design is one of the most recognizable ones in the field, and on top of that, the colors blue and red, sharp teeth, and having a tail are just inherent to sharks and shark-related designs because they're common tropes and are closely associated with depicting that animal. But how do we deal with this? Well, there are infinitely many ways to work with these tropes, ways to apply them in new and exciting combinations, and that should be every VTuber's aim. Just look at all these fantastic unique sharks I have here. And I know for a fact some of them have been accused of copying Gura or even each other. But I'd say all of them are doing the right things with their design to make them sufficiently distinct from each other and her. What I'm saying here is that there's a lot of nuance to what is and isn't copying, but the big picture, is maintaining strong visual distinction from a source of inspiration. So, with all that in mind, how do we avoid copying others' VTuber designs? I mean, it sounds really simple. You might just say, don't do it, forehead. But if that logic worked, we wouldn't be seeing it happening nearly as much as we do. So, here are some more actionable ways that both VTubers themselves and their artists can combat this. On the VTuber's end, you do need to decide not to intentionally mimic another popular VTuber. It can be alluring, I know, to want to appeal to the same audience or commit to something similar because it's been proven to work, but it rarely goes well if you mimic someone too closely. Case in point, all the copying allegations constantly circulate that I do not want you to be the next person at the center of. Why would someone watch you, the off-brand, store-generic version of the design, when they can watch the original real deal instead when you're mimicking someone that closely? You will learn your branding will be much better served by a more original design one way or another. So please listen and do not learn the hard way. I don't want that for you. Therefore, to differentiate yourself, having a specific layered concept for your character is the first step to success here. Yem Allbat and I both have formulas for creating unique concepts, which you can check out in our videos I've linked in the description, but the TLDR of those videos is that by combining your desired character traits, fashion style, motifs, species, profession, and more, you'll have a good basis for a design that may be similar to existing ones, but with your own personal twist. Then, when you go to commission an artist for your design, create a mood board artist exploring multiple ideas from different sources for each aspect of design. This way, your artist can easily synthesize those ideas together to create something fun and new and fresh and unique for you. So here's a sample of my mood boards for my current model, which took the form of a Pinterest board. My inspirations were mostly real outfits or character designs, but yours can include anime characters, other VTubers, elements of really any piece of media you like, whatever you need to convey the vibe that you want. You could even be more specific with collages for individual parts of your design, like your eyes, your hairstyle, and more. So, aside from being great and helping ensure you have a unique design, it's also super duper helpful to your artist too, because it provides them with a clearer idea of what you're aiming for, so everyone wins. On the other hand, as a VTuber artist, you do also need to look out for your clients, as they may not know the troubles that could befall them for having a design too closely mimicking another's. I know it can be hard to balance their expectations with yours, trust me. I also do character design for VTubers, but it is still your responsibility as a freelance artist of any integrity to express concerns to a client over something like this. Do not become an enabler. If you knowingly design something that would fall under the academic definition of plagiarism, because it's too one-to-one with someone else's design, you are also at fault when the VTuber you made it for gets called out for copying. When a client provides you with a reference they want to be just like, try your best to get them to explain what specific aspects of the design they've shown you are enticing to them. So that way you can better find a compromise between something original and the reference without sacrificing what they want for their design or landing in hot water. Also, encourage them to try a deeper concept. If they present you with a concept that's just an animal or plant species and a color, prompt them to think about an occupation, fashion style, or other motif that could be added. I tend to serve people Yam's VTuber concept worksheet to get them thinking more creatively in this department. And Don't be afraid to show them other inspirations or references that you think would benefit them to bring into the design. Often, the best way of getting someone on board with changes is to show them just how well something else they hadn't considered might work. At the end of the day, though, I do understand. Sometimes there's only so much you can do with a stubborn client, but at least give it the old college try to try and keep your own butt covered should it become an issue down the line. So, for fun and to illustrate some of my points I've made here, once upon a time, a year ago, a character designer friend and I decided to tackle designing VTubers based on a very common trope I'm sure you're all familiar with, to prove there's still new and fresh ways to handle even a concept as saturated as this one. So up first, this is Billy, my bestie who designs for Western cartoons and animation. As a result of his background, he has a very design sensibility than a lot of us in the more anime fields do, and that alone would likely prevent him from design that matches an existing pink cat girl. But he also intuitively did what he did just without meaning to tell him to. He added ears to the concept. He gave her a motif and an occupation, dragon fruit fighter. And in the end, the design lined up a little closer to red. But I still think it's a very unique, fresh-feeling design using common tropes. I, on the other hand, attempted to stick a tad closer to VTuber art styles for my own. I was a little baby with anime style. I'd drawn nothing but semi-realism for the last 10 years, but I gave it my best shot. I had to make the closer to a particular pink cat girl. How very similar concepts can still be executed in completely days. I gave my design an element like the existing example has, but in a more integrated by combining that with a roller derby hobby and fashion sense and therefore round up with a completely unique design, if also a little more lavender maybe. But here I am over a year later after designing those two cat girls, and I really wasn't satisfied that I'd sufficiently proved my point, and I also can't look at that old design, it hurts me. So I designed another treat. Here we have the Italy ghost themed cat girl. Please notice, she is still very distinct from the existing girl cat girl the concepts from, and other two examples. I added a repeating cross motif, referenced a variety of clothing elements and hairstyles, and also chose a fresh color palette despite keeping hair pink, and all that made it easy to develop a unique take on those concepts. My point here is that there's nothing wrong with using a clear or overdone, just so long as you put your own spin on it and make it feel fresh. Overtubes are overdone for a reason after all. It's because they're strong in their design elements, they resonate with viewers, and often just fun for artists with. So, with all that said about what copying is and how to avoid it, I know there's still the saying that mimicry is the greatest flattery, but I'd be inclined to say that it doesn't always feel like that when you're the one being copied, and that from a legal or academic standpoint, it is just flat out false. It's theft. Truly think about how you'd feel if you found out that something you spent hours, days, blood, sweat, tears, and money on was copied by someone else. Don't lie to yourself. You wouldn't be happy about it. The point of me making this video was to give everyone a way they can do better in these types of situations. VTubers, don't copy others. Please, it really should just be that simple. This isn't a difficult ask. Aspire to be more than just adjacent to someone, and I promise it'll be much better for you in the long run. Artists, don't enable VTubers to copy others. If you see it happening with a client, try and steer things in a better direction. Community members, don't send a VTuber a million DMs when you think someone is copying them. There's no way that's good for their mental health, and you're putting them in a tough spot by calling on them to address it. And to everyone, don't go making call-out posts over this kind of thing. Be a responsible, mature adult and take it up with someone one-on-one if you have a concern. It reflects very poorly on you to go making accusations, and starting a harassment campaign is never worth it. And on top of that, do you really want to make sure that everyone involved in VTubing knows the name of the potential copycat? Because I would think not. So fellas, let's be smart about all this, please! Did I write this script out of frustration when I was grading my students' finals, like, more than a year ago in May, that included a plagiarism of Chainsaw Man, while my Twitter was being flooded by a copying accusation fiasco for like the 10th time that year already? Maybe. Did I just decide now, more than a year later, to go through with this script because I just had to contact a 30th person who has submitted an almost one-to-one copy of another VTuber's design to my design critique form? Also maybe. I'm losing it a little bit. This topic seemingly never ceases to be relevant, sadly. So, for the sake of limiting the psychic damage I take, if nothing else, please consider taking the things I've mentioned here to heart. I hope this got some wheels turning for you in some way, or at the very least served as a warning. If there's other topics you'd like to hear me talk about, VTubing, art related, otherwise, do let me know in the comments. I'm sorry I abandoned y'all for like a year when it comes to long form videos. I definitely lost inspiration and the willpower to edit for a hot minute there, but I'm making a comeback, I swear. And if you'd like to see more of me, I do also stream art, educational, adjacent content here and on Twitch. But anyways, I'll see you later. Take care, fellas.